Yeah, you do.
There we go. Hey, Jim.
Hey.
Welcome. We're excited to have you here. I'm going to read your bio real quickly. Kate's got a lot of questions. The audience has a ton of questions. We were going through them before, so we're just so excited to hear you. So we just want to say welcome to you first before we get started.
Thank you. You want me to save you some breath?
No, I like to read your bio.
Okay. Okay.
So don't worry. I took like 30 minutes and I put this bio together for you.
Wow.
So,
Wow. Well, thank you.
of course, that's what we do here. That's what we do.
My man.
So thank you. And for everyone else too, we have an audience that's also watching us on social media. So that is very exciting. But Jim Cathcart, with over 35 years of professional speaking around the world, he is one of the best known and most award winning motivational speakers in the business. He has delivered more than 3,000 presentations to audiences in every state of the US, most provinces of Canada, and countries from Scotland to Singapore. He needs to have bodyguards when he goes to China. It's incredible. Business strategist, psychological researcher, and philosopher at heart, he is known as a down to earth regular guy, which we witnessed in person. But after hearing Earl Nightingale on the radio one day in 1972, he was inspired to change his life. Today, he is listed in the Professional Speaker Hall of Fame, which is insane, a recipient of the prestigious Golden Gavel Award, along with Earl Nightingale and Zig Ziglar, as well as many others.
Tony
He has been the
Robbins.
president of the National Speakers Association. He's authored over 16 books, including The Acorn Principle. Oh, sorry, 22 books.
Yeah.
22 books. I apologize.
Yeah. You're
Over
working off
20,
an
he just corrected me.
older bio.
Over
Yep.
22 books. And the Acorn Principle is one of them, which really changed my life. He was listed as one of the top 100 minds on personal
And we
development
lost
by
you.
Leadership Excellence magazine. Welcome, Jim. I'm going to hand it to Kate.
Thank you, Daniel. And hello, Kate. And hi, everybody.
Jim, I think you're muted though.
Oh, am I? Let's see. Just a second. Do-do-do.
But we got Jimmy. While Jim is getting the microphone set up on his phone, make sure that you bring.
There you go.
Now we can hear you, Jim. Perfect.
Yep. Thank you, Daniel. Hello, Kate. And hi, everybody. Nice to be here. Hey, can you hear me?
All right, I'm going to hand it to Kate. Kate, can you? I think Kate's having some microphone issues on her phone.
Yes.
Okay.
Can you hear me, you guys?
Yes, we can hear you now.
So, yeah.
Yep.
So, Jim, before we're going to go, everyone's so excited to hear about how to be a paid best speaker, right? So, Jim, can you tell us a little bit background about you? Where did you grow up, Jim? Tell me about the young Jim.
Well, the young Jim, I grew up in Little Rock, Arkansas. My dad was a telephone repairman. My mom was a homemaker, and she was taking care of my grandfather, who was an invalid from a stroke. And for 7 years, he was in a hospital bed in our front bedroom and had to be cared for all the time. He never spoke, never moved from the bed in 7 years. And my grandmother was there, and mom took care of me and my little sister. And the interesting thing is, mom, uh, she ran away from an emotionally abusive home when she was 15 years old. She was a country girl, and her dad married a woman. Her own mom had died when she was very young, 5 years old. And her dad married a woman that turned out to be kind of a shrew, a very mean spirited woman. And so mom grew up in that until about age 15 and said, I'm done. And she left rural Louisiana and went to Little Rock, Arkansas, and went to a boarding house and said, I don't have a place to live and I don't have a job, but I'm going to go get one. Can I stay here? And the woman running the place said yes. And mom went downtown and got a job as a clerk in a variety store, five and dime, they called it back then. And so she never had any training in how to raise kids or didn't know domestic skills except what she picked up along the way. She ended up moving to San Francisco during World War II and working for the Railway Express Agency and Western Union. And then when dad came back from the Pacific, he was fighting over there. He came back as an Army officer and met her in San Francisco. They had met previously, of course. And they took the train back to Arkansas and got married in Little Rock and settled down there. And dad went to work for the phone company. So Fast forward a little bit, 1946, I was born. I'll save you the mass. I'm 75. Um, so I was born. A few years later, my sister was born, and Dad's a telephone lineman at first. So he's gone all week, only home on weekends. And my sister and I are there trying to amuse ourselves while Mom takes care of my grandfather and grandmother, who both needed attention. And Mom was overwhelmed. So when Dad would get home on the weekends, she would say, "Would you straighten those kids out?" And of course, he doesn't want to come in and be the bad guy. So he would jokingly march us into the living room and make us lay on the floor with our arms out straight. And he'd say, "There, I've straightened them out." And she'd just laugh. And so everything would get fine for a few days, and then he'd leave again. And of course, it'd get tense. So that was the first several years of my life. And I grew up, Dad finally came home and became a repairman. So he was home every night. And we had a pretty normal life after that. Walked to school 3 blocks away and, grew up expecting to be ordinary. I figured I'd go to work for some outfit like the phone company and work as a office clerk or a middle manager or something. And at age 65, I would retire, and at whatever the statistical age for my gene pool was, I would die and make room for other people. That's what I expected from life. That's not what I wanted. That's what I expected. What I wanted was to be like my heroes, like Roy Rogers in Cowboys and Indians, like John Wayne in the movies, like Elvis on stage playing guitar. I wanted to be like that. But I didn't see any path in the world for me to get there. And so years later, after 2 years of college, and I dropped out during the second one, I got married in 1970. Now, no college degree, no money in the bank, no connections in the community, no particular skills, never had excelled at anything really. I was a decent student, but average, and never was an athlete. And I'm working for a government agency, the Little Rock Housing Authority, which was the urban renewal agency, making $500 a month. And I heard Earl Nightingale on the radio, like someone listening to this podcast today. I heard the dean of personal motivation, and he said in 1972, pause for effect, that was a long time ago. He said in a little 5-minute radio show, if you'll spend 5 extra minutes if you'll spend his radio show was 5 minutes. If you'll spend 1 extra hour every day studying one field for the next 5 years, in 5 years, you'll be a national expert. In 7 years, you'll be one of the world's leading authorities. And I thought, I don't want to be an expert in urban renewal. And I thought about it for a couple of weeks, and finally it hit me. What I wanted to do was what he was doing, but I didn't know what that was. I just knew he was helping people grow. He was motivating people, and I wanted to be able to do that. But I'd never heard a speech other than in school or at a church. I had no idea what public speaking was about. I had nothing to say worth paying to hear. So, what am I going to do? So I decided to become what he said, fanatical about personal development, and start studying applied behavioral science, which is practical psychology, every day for at least an hour. And I read all the classic books, some of which you can see behind me: Think and Grow Rich, Power of Positive Thinking, As a Man Thinketh, on and on. The favorites of the early personal development era, what we came to call the human development movement, back during the 70s and 80s. And I got involved in that very, very heavily for 4 years, and joined the Junior Chamber of Commerce, gave in 2 years 400 speeches at JC's meetings, teaching the things that they taught each other, goal setting and interpersonal communication. So I did 400 meetings in 2 years for free after work at the Housing Authority, new wife and baby at home. making $500 a month. And that was what it took. After that, I got the opportunity to become a trainer for one organization, then another, to move on into positions where I was able to open my own business. And in 1976, 77, I started Cathcart, what is today Cathcart Institute. And it evolved from there. And I've done 3,300 speeches in, like you said, Daniel, every state in the United States, province, Canada, South America, all across China, Europe. Got 22 published books. My TED Talk, TED video is in the top 1% of the top 1% of all TED Talks with millions of views. I mean, I've just been absolutely blessed.
Wow. I counted in here. You said you did 400 speeches with not getting paid, but total up to this day is 3,300. 3,300,000?
3,300 speeches, 3,300 speeches for high fee.
That's
So that
amazing.
adds up
So I guess,
to a pretty cool career.
yeah. So when you think about it, we are sometimes, I think, over ahead of like you probably did. I get a chance and honor to have dinner with you in Austin.
And
And
back at you, it was my honor. Thank you.
oh, so you said about mileage, message, and market. So
That's
I
right.
love how I remember that. I'll never forget that night. But mileage, when it comes to mileage, I mean, you did 400 speeches for free before you started charging people.
And I did them in the worst of circumstances. Like I remember one summertime speech in the basement of a church where it was so hot, everybody had to get paper plates to fan themselves because it was like 90 or 100 degrees in the room and humid. I remember meeting in a fire station and people were sitting on the running boards of the fire trucks and in folding chairs. I remember meeting in a guy's living room and the TV was playing in the next room because his family was watching TV. And that night was the night that Richard Nixon resigned as president. That's kind of an interruption to a speech, you know? And I was speaking in Tulsa, Oklahoma to a small group when a guy came in years later and said, President Reagan's been shot. In the middle of the seminar I was teaching. I was speaking in Washington, D.C., and the building caught on fire. And I was the only guy with a microphone, so I had to evacuate 700 people safely. I was in a bar in Pennsylvania that had a party going on in the next room, and we couldn't hear ourselves think. And the lighting was so bad that I had to stand under a light, just like the top of my head. Luckily, back then, it wasn't very shiny. And it was more like yours, Kate, with lots of nice black hair up there, you know. And so I stood there and gave a speech, but I looked a little like Frankenstein with the way it was lighting me. I gave a speech in New Orleans one time with a Dixieland band political rally in the next room with a movable wall between us, and we could hear every note and every scream. I've had people have seizures in the middle of one of my speeches in the audience. I've spoken in freezing cold rooms where the people huddled together and kept their coats on with the collars turned up. I've spoken literally in a log cabin by Coleman Lantern for a JC's meeting in northern Arkansas. And I've spoken outdoors by a swimming pool. And during the middle of my speech, while we're standing there, you know, they're all around the pool, a couple of them sitting in the hot tub because they're in swim trunks. And I'm standing there in what started out as a sport coat and a tie. I take off the tie, I lose the sport coat, I roll up my sleeves. I've got a flip chart and I'm doing this speech. And two women walk out of a neighboring condo to come out to sunbathe, topless. I lost the audience on that one. So I've had every distraction you can imagine. I mean, that's just a little sample. I could go on for days telling you about the weird circumstances in which I've spoken. And what that teaches you is this is not about you. This is about the audience and what they're experiencing and whether they're getting value or not. And you've got to just figure all these other things are moving parts and take charge of what you can and ignore or cope with what you can't. And if you have to, adjourn and move to a different location. Like when I evacuated that building that was on fire, we ended up on the steps of a neighboring building outdoors. And I did the seminar in about 23-degree weather, a cappella, no microphone.
Wow, Jim, what an amazing. You're such a great storyteller. I mean, I can imagine
Thank you.
33,000,
No,
3,000,
3,300, not
3,300,
33,000. Yeah.
33,000. All right, so Jim, can you take us back your very first event? What is that like? Did you do well? Take us back.
No, I smelled awfully bad. The first speaking I did was at JC's, Junior Chamber of Commerce meetings. So it was for small groups of anywhere from 8 to 15, 20 people at a time, typically. And it was in some little meeting room in the back of a restaurant or at somebody's garage or, whatever, wherever we could find a free place to meet. And I had read the JC's training manual that day. And so what I was speaking on that evening was what I had read like 2 hours earlier. And this one particular night, the president of our chapter was not able to be there. And he said, Jim, you run the meeting. And we had a guest speaker, a man named David Hale, who was the state president for the JCs of Arkansas at that time. And so I ran the meeting and I introduced David and he spoke. And then we adjourned the meeting and David said, Jim, come here. He said, you've never had an officer's briefing, have you? I said, what do you mean? He said, about how to run meetings and how to speak in front of a group. And I said, well, which means no. And he said, let me give you a couple of tips that you might want to follow. And I just, I was sitting there realizing how poorly I had done and listening to David and learning from him. And what I was learning was such fundamental stuff. It's like, look them in the eye, start on time, just finish your sentences, pay attention, simple, everyday things. But I didn't know those things. I'd played guitar and sung in nightclubs and bars, but that was the extent of my time on stage. I didn't know how to behave in front of a group when I was trying to communicate with them, or how to structure a meeting, or how to introduce a guest, or even how to thank the guest and adjourn a meeting. So I was just reading from the manual, and it was pretty humiliating. But I got better over time, and better to the point that I was popular and had to turn down engagements because I was getting more requests than I could handle. And then someone offered to pay me $10 for gas if I would drive from Little Rock to Texarkana and give a speech and back to Little Rock that night. Now that's 130 miles one way. So I did a 260-mile round trip for $10. That was probably my first speaking fee.
Wow, thank you for sharing that, Jim.
Yeah. So I started at the top. I've always been one of the top speakers in the world. Always. Not.
Now, Jim, what advice would you give for anyone that screwed up so bad? How can you rebound? What advice would you give?
Well, first off, anything you don't know how to do, you're going to do it poorly. But that doesn't mean you're incapable of doing it well. That means you don't know yet. See, that's one of the greatest words in the English language. Yet. Gee, I do that, but I'm not tall enough yet. I don't have any experience in that field yet. I don't think I'm good at selling yet. When I run, it hurts my knees, so I don't think I can keep on being a runner yet. All of these things are temporary situations, most of them somewhere in a growth curve. They're one of the stages. Like when I started mountain hiking and I did 18 years of 3 days a week, 6 miles at a time at sunrise every Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday with a small group of friends in the Santa Monica Mountains. I did that for 18 years. And when I started with the group, I had foot problems, plantar fasciitis. I had ankle problems, knee pains, other ailments of sorts that are related to not being a runner. Well, as I became more and more conditioned, I got to where none of those things bothered me. And after even 15, 16 years of doing that 3 days a week on rugged mountain trails, steep and loose in many cases, in all kinds of weather, I didn't have any leg problems or foot problems. Once in a while I'd fall down and I had skinned up, hands problems. But, one day I broke my cheek and jaw because I was running real fast downhill. And I came to a turn and I was going to do one of these fancy little spins on the turn, and the turn slipped out from under me. So my feet didn't grab. And so I went, whoosh, and my face whap right on the ground. And the ground was hard. And I got up and I dusted myself off and I looked for blood and didn't see any. And so I started back jogging on the hiking trail. And two of my friends that were with me, one of them was a doctor, and he said, "Wait a minute, come here." He said, "Okay." He said, "You're all right for now, but you need to get checked. That was a hard blow." I said, "Okay." So I went on and finished the hike and got a good personal time on it. And then I'm at the top of the mountain, and he comes up and he says, "Do you have any idea what your face looks like?" And I said, "No." He said, "It looks like a chipmunk." My cheek was broken and my jaw was broken, but they were minor breaks. But what happened was that was the thing between my sinuses and my skin. And so it let the air that circulated through my breathing out into my cheek, and I could go when I pushed on my cheek. It was like, like there was a balloon there or something. And he said, "You got to come to the office." So I went to his office, got x-rayed. Sure enough, I had a break. And he said, "But it's not bad enough to do anything about it. So just let it heal. Have a nice day." I said, "Can I still run?" He said, "Yeah." So, and that's the thing. It's always yet.
Mm.
I haven't recovered yet. Okay. I'm not smart enough yet. I don't have any experience with that. And thank you.
Yeah. No, Jim, tell me about from $10. What was the next fee? Do you remember?
Next one was a biggie. Next one was
Okay, the
several
biggie.
years later, like 2 or 3 years later. I was teaching a class at night for $15 a month. $15 at Tulsa Junior College, teaching a class on time management. And someone from the university, the college, Tulsa Junior College, said, "We would like you to speak to our faculty. We're having a in-processing event, and we'd like you to do a keynote speech, and we'll give you $100. $100 blew my mind. I couldn't believe it. Wow. And I'm talking to college teachers, and I don't even have a degree. Are you kidding me? This was huge. I still have the notes from that speech. That was just such an enormous big deal to me at the time. And by the way, to fast forward 40 plus years, in September of 2021, I received an honorary degree in business from High Point University in North Carolina.
Wow.
I never did earn a college degree, but I finally received one as an honorary degree. And by the way, I am a professor in the executive MBA program at the School of Management at California Lutheran University, and I've written 2 college textbooks. So, and that's without a college degree, but that's not
Wow.
without a great deal of learning.
That's amazing. Jim, how does that feel when you receive that honor, like from university?
Well, first off,
How
I
does that?
didn't feel worthy of it. And I just feel so enormously grateful. My good friend, lifelong colleague and friend, Dr. Nito Kubain, is the president of the university, and he's transformed it in recent years. He took over in, I think, 2005, he put his professional speaking and training career on hold and took on the presidency of the university, High Point University, and has exploded it into a multi-billion-dollar university from the quiet little thing it used to be back in 2005. And he called me and he said, this was like 5 or 6 months ago. He said, Jim, do I remember correctly? You don't have a college degree. I said, that's correct. He said, we would like to give you one. I said, are you serious? He said, yes, I am serious. We're going to give 4. And I would like you to be one of those recipients. We don't do this normally. And it's sort of thing that, in some cases people make big donations and they get a honorary doctorate or something, but that's not the case here. He said, I just want you to be a graduate of High Point University, so I'm going to give you a degree. And I went to this huge event where they were dedicating a big arena that he and his wife had donated, $170 million arena. Let that sink in. $170 million arena. They had the graduation ceremony for me and my colleagues, and it was full regalia, with the mortarboards and the robes and everything. And we marched in behind the person carrying the scepter and another one playing bagpipes. And all 10 of the deans of the schools of High Point University in their full regalia were marching in front. And we went up to the front of this big group, and the president of the university and the chancellor, I think, they were the ones that did the honors. Wow, what an event!
Wow, that's
Now,
pretty amazing.
I want to isolate something right now that I hope all of our listeners hear very deeply. When I started as a speaker, my first speech that I was asking people to pay me for was become the person who would achieve your goals, and the goals will come to you. Become the person who would achieve your goals, and then the goals will come to you, right? So if you become a world-class athlete, world-class competitions and awards are going to find you, right? All you got to do is be available to say, yes, I'll compete in the Olympics, right? So become the person who is qualified to attract what you want in your life. And so that was 1977, where I first recorded that message in front of a group in Louisville, Kentucky. Fast forward to today. I have had the honor and the blessing of receiving every major award in public speaking and professional speaking in the world. I mean, literally, I challenge anyone to find one I haven't received. It's that much. Oh my God, how could I be worthy of that? I don't know that I am, but I am really grateful for it. But my message today is the same message. Become a magnet, not an arrow, or at least not only an arrow. Be a magnet to attract the kind of life experiences you want. And you will find that once you have become that kind of a person, your colleagues will call you and say, hey, we'd like to give you a degree from our university. Your association will call you and say, you've been nominated for the Cavett Award, which is a Lifetime Achievement Award with national speakers. They'll call you from London and say, we are inducting you into the 2012 class of the Sales and Marketing Hall of Fame in London and Paris. They will call you and induct you into the Professional Speakers Hall of Fame. All the things you seek will start seeking you after you acquire the qualities, the traits, the knowledge, the skill, the discipline of being the kind of person that would have those things.
Wow. Become a magnet, not an arrow. I wrote it down. No, Jim.
Not only an arrow is a better way to say that, because you do need to be an arrow in some instances, but the main strategy needs to be become a magnet.
Become a. Now, Jim, what was your deepest motivation in life? What was behind all this?
I wanted to matter. I didn't think I ever would. And I wanted to be someone that made a difference, someone that the world in some level cared about the fact that I existed. And it's not that I wasn't loved by my parents, I was, but I just never felt like I mattered a whole lot beyond that. And so I said, I will do what I need to do to succeed, to be a person that has enough value to share with others that they will want to pay for access to that value. And that, it took a long time. Someone said to me that I was doing a seminar for a youth group, American Heart Association in Dallas a long time ago. And I had many of these things I've done today, I had not done yet, but I was a full-time paid professional speaker and doing pretty well. And I had a book. And this young woman, an Olympic athlete, who I was in awe of her. I'd never met an Olympian. She said, Mr. Cathcart, how did you know you would succeed? And I'd never thought about it before. And I thought for a minute and I said, well, I knew I'd never quit trying. She said, well, what if it was harder than you expected? Then it's harder than I expected. What if it takes longer, way longer than you thought? Then it's probably going to take way longer than I thought. What if it costs more? Then I guess it's going to cost more. In other words, none of those are reasons not to do it. Those are just things that make it a little bigger than I thought it was going to be. So it never occurred to me to not ultimately become a full-time professional speaker and author and to help people grow like my hero on the radio years ago, Earl Nightingale, was doing.
Wow. Jim,
See,
thank you
that's the one thing, and pardon me for talking over you, Kate, but the one thing that is the determining factor in a person's success. Every single successful person ever has this one quality. They may be different in all the other ways, but they share this one common quality. They decided they were going to succeed. Period. They decided they were going to do it. Everything else is committee work.
Wow. So simple, but so big. Jim,
Yeah.
if your parents are watching you right now, what do you think they're thinking?
I think they're saying, good job. I think that they feel pretty good about it because I've not only had a wonderfully blessed life myself, but my wife and I have raised a son who is now 50 years old, and he has two children, 20 and 18, and his life is an abundant life. He's a good person worthy of respect. He's a person I admire, and I'd love to grow up to be like him. And his kids are turning out the same way. In the Bible, there's a passage that says, by their fruits, you shall know them. So how do you know this is an apple tree? Because it's producing apples. Duh. Well, how do you know that this success philosophy works? Because it's working for me and him and them. In other words, I've seen this not just in my family, but in thousands and thousands of instances around the world with my clients over the years. And I can't imagine that there's any contradiction to this that I haven't run across. So the methods I'm teaching are the ones I've found to be valid, reliable, proven, and noble. When I talk with people, I do a program called Going Pro. When you decide to get serious about, say, a speaking career or authorship or starting a new business or whatever it is, when you decide to go pro, the rules change and the expectations, the demands on you change. And there are 5 elements in the Going Pro experience as I teach it. I teach, number 1, become more intentional about every aspect of your life. mental, physical, family, social, spiritual, career, financial, emotional, more intentional. Okay. Number 2, more knowledgeable in every aspect of your life. Never, ever, ever stop learning. More accountable. Make your numbers public to the extent that that's appropriate. In other words, be held accountable by yourself and by society in general for what you do or neglect to do. Next is be disciplined about what you do. Develop, people say, well, you got a lot of self-discipline. Well, maybe I do, but I didn't at first. Discipline is acquired not day by day, choice by choice, moment by moment. I could run to the corner and stop, and it wouldn't help my fitness. But if I ran to the corner every day, many of those days I would have the discipline to push myself a block further, a mile further, multiple miles further, and ultimately I'd get really fit. I did that years ago. So more intentional, more accountable, more knowledgeable, more disciplined, and more honorable. Be a person who lives with dignity and acknowledges the dignity of other people, regardless of their station. You can usually tell a big person by how they treat little people. And you can tell a little person by how they treat little people. When the other person has no power, the way you interact with them shows me a whole lot about you.
Wow. That's Dan. Isn't that what your dad said? Treat the janitor really well.
Absolutely.
What was that? Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's something that we live by, and we know how that feels being there in the bottom, and you treat everyone, whether from janitor to CEO. And
Yep.
yep, Jim, that dinner in Austin, things that really stuck with me is when I asked you how to be a great speaker, and you said, just be a good person.
And then agree to speak. That's
Hmm.
right. But yeah, if you're a great person, all of your speeches will be great. Not that doesn't mean they'll be delivered well. It means that the quality of what you're bringing is really, really, really good. So if you stumble through the speech and you have a stutter, it'll still be worth listening to. If you're just really awkward about the way you deliver it, it'll still be worth listening to. Now, you can learn speaking skills, public speaking skills, and become really good at delivering almost any message. You could be the equivalent of a TV newscaster or a commentator, someone who is really good at saying someone else's words. And that's fine because there's value to that. Actors don't write their own script, they deliver it. So, you can specialize in the speaking part, but I'd rather be the person that they want to hear speak. Someone said to me on a plane one time, so what do you do? I said, I'm a professional speaker and author. They said, you just speak on anything? I said, sure. And they looked at me incredulous and said, really? I said, no, of course not. People don't pay me for the sounds I make. They pay me for the ideas they get. It's not the speaking, it's the communicating. you know?
Well, Jim, you're playing like Elvis right now. You can sing. Oh, by the way, yes, by the way, Jim can sing, and I'm sure he's gonna pull his guitar today, but he can sing. He was humming Desperado, which is one of my favorite songs
Oh,
that
I
my
love that song.
I oh, there you go. There you go. Yes, there you go. We're gonna have a treat
Yeah.
tonight.
Well, it's here, that's for sure. Desperado, why don't you come to your senses? You've been out riding fences for so long now. You're a hard one, and I know you've got your reason. The things that are pleasing you can hurt you somehow. That's a little too deep for me, so I'm going to move it up. Don't you draw the Queen of diamonds, boy, she'll beat you if she's able. The Queen of hearts is always your best bet. It seems to me some fine things have been laid upon your table, but you only want the ones you can't get. Desperado, why don't you come to your senses? Come down from your fences. Open the gate. It may be raining, but there's a rainbow above you. You better let somebody love you. Let somebody love you. You better let somebody love you before it's too late. There you
Now,
go.
everyone, you guys have to open your microphone, and that was amazing.
I hadn't
That
played that song in a little while.
was amazing. Now,
Well, the cool
Jim,
thing is you asked for a song that I knew how to play.
there you go. Now, Jim, you can sing. You're
Mhm.
the Hall of Famer of all speakers. You're a great person. You're a great dad. What is it still you wanted? Is there
Well,
something that you wanted to be that you didn't get a chance to explore?
extraordinarily wealthy. I would love to have an abundance of wealth so that I didn't have to worry about whether I'm working or not. I have not been as disciplined as I would like to have been about investing and saving over the years. And I'm doing well. I'm living a very, very nice life. But I could have been a whole lot wealthier had I been more disciplined in that part of my life. Um, I've got friends that I grew up with in the business who have, built substantial estates at the same time with the same level of value delivery. So that would be about the only remaining thing. I'm always writing a new book. I've got another one going now, and I just released one last week, "The 13 Keys to Riches" with Eric Swanson. And before that, in September, I released a book with Lisa Patrick called "Intelligent Curiosity: How to Know What to Wonder About, How to Notice More." And what I'm best known for, besides the Acorn Principle, thank you, Daniel, is my book "Relationship Selling" and the concept around that. And I just 3 weeks ago went to um, St. Louis and recorded 32 video lessons in a course on professional selling that's going to be published probably at the end of February by Biz Library. And then I've got the program that I mentioned to you off camera about, going on in Machu Picchu, Peru. And I'm hoping to go back to China when trade opens up again and revive the lecture tour that I had going all around that country.
Wow. And Jim, for anyone who wanted to connect with you for the Going Pro, you said just connect with you on LinkedIn. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Is that
the
where we?
reason for that is Facebook. I'm at the limit, my Facebook's a regular page, not a private one. And so I'm at 5,000 and I keep getting requests I'd love to say yes to, but then I'd have to unfriend somebody and that's awkward. So go to LinkedIn and there's no limit and we can communicate just as easily there. And also my name is the easiest way to find me. You do a Google search on Jim Cathcart, you're going to find at least 300,000 listings. And my email is my name, Jim at Cathcart.com.
There you go.
And then my music website, that's guitarmusiclive.com. Guitarmusiclive.com.
Man, it's just
So,
amazing. It's probably the best interview I have to say because I feel like I got serenade. I feel like it's my birthday. But Jim, what are some tips you would advise to anyone? Of course, we're all doing it virtually. How can you gamify it?
so
What are some of the tips that you can give them? I mean, it's hard to like what we would like to know.
you mean for speaking, for
For
public speaking?
speaking, yeah, yes, for
Yeah.
public speaking
Well,
and
first off,
virtual.
remember that anytime you're talking to more than one person, that's public speaking. So, and public speaking is never about the speaker, and it's not about the message, and it's not about the audience, and it's not about the setting. You say, well, isn't that everything? Almost. The reason for a speech, whether it's to 2 people or 200 million people, is to deliver value to the listeners, to give them something they can use, or to accomplish through your speech a feeling that is good for them, or to activate them to take some action that would be a beneficial thing. In other words, it's all about getting them to either take action or understand a concept or feel a certain way or be informed better about something to shift their perspective. One of the other things that I'm doing is I'm now a co-host of a PBS TV show that's based in Dallas, and it's called Perspectives Matter. It's been on the air for 33 years. It was previously called by the name of its previous host, McQuistion, Dennis McQuistion, and it's talking about things that matter with people who care. I love that. So I'm a co-host on that show now, and spending a lot of time studying up on current affairs and talking with world experts and things like that, and in fascinating forum. But I recognize the show is not about me on any level. My opinion doesn't matter because I'm not a commentator, I'm a co host. And it's my job to pull the message from the guest. And I can offer an observation about something that I know, and use that to stimulate a question. But it needs to be about revealing the answer to that question to the viewers. And I also have been reminded as I'm going into this new realm, it's new for me, that I should be always talking to one viewer. It's like on Clubhouse. You're talking to one person at a time. They said, no, you're not. You're talking to all of them. Well, each person is only hearing for one. So when I'm talking to you, Daniel, even if Kate's overhearing it, it's a conversation between me and you, and she may get value from it or be affected by it, but still, for me and you, that's one conversation. For me and her, it's another. And that's the thing. The best speakers in the world make you feel like you're the only one in their audience. I saw him looking at 30,000 people, but he was looking me in the eye. He was talking to me, dude. That was personal. Well, maybe, but it might just be that if you were in row 35, seat number 12, when he looked in that general direction, it seemed he was looking directly into your eyes, but it also seemed that way to 25 other people. You learn over time how that works.
Wow. Thank you, Jim. Now you mentioned that you hang out with Zig Ziglar. Can you tell us about what is that like during that time at the
He was
peak?
such a great guy. He was, well, I went in 1976 or 7. It was November 16th, and it was 76, I think, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, at the Oral Roberts University, great big arena center called the MABEE, maybe the Maybe family. Yeah, the Maybe Center. I was addressing. I mean, I was in the audience. I was one of 11,700 people, and Zig Ziglar was one of the lineup of speakers that day. Art Linkletter, Robert Schuller, Earl Nightingale, Cavett Robert, founder of the National Speakers Association, Paul Harvey, I mean, it was Norman Vincent Peale, a humongous lineup of the big names of the day. And the rock star of them all was Zig Ziglar. It was like a rock show, and Zig was Elvis. I mean, he had us from the opening statement. And I was just wowed by him. And a few years later, after I had become a full-time professional speaker, I got involved with the National Speakers Association, and I met Zig. And he was very gracious and just, treated me like an equal, which I thought was amazing. And then I served on a committee with him, and then I got to know him better. And then one time he was in Tulsa, we went jogging. Another time I was in Dallas. He and his wife, Jean, took me to church with them. And wow. I mean, it's just such a thrill to be around such an inspiring man and to be treated as an equal. That was one of the gifts that he had, was the ability to see everybody as a human being, not as someone above or below. And after he passed away, his son, Tom, invited me just a year and a half ago to be the keynote speaker for Ziglar Learning Corporation. And what an honor that was.
Wow.
Oh, and my agent in China, Dr. David Chu in China, he called me and he said, Jim, called on me. He was in person in San Diego at a speakers convention. He said, I've been studying you for a few years now. I've seen you at these conventions and I've seen you in different settings. And I would like to invite you to join my stable of speakers. And I said, you're a bureau? He said, no, not so much a bureau. He said, I only have 10. It's Mark Victor Hansen, who co-authored the Chicken Soup series. And it's John Gray, who wrote Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. Tom Hopkins, sales trainer. Jay Abraham, marketing guru. Bob Proctor. And Roger Dawson, who was a negotiations expert. And he said, and Joe Girard, the sales trainer, world leading sales expert, died. And I need to replace him. And it was down to 2 people. And Zig's too old, so it's you. I said it was between Zig Ziglar and me. He said, yep, you're the guy. And I went over in 2015 and spoke in 2 or 3 cities, and it went over really well. So in 2016, we did more cities, and in 2017 and 18, even more and even more. And in 2019, I did 6 separate round trips to China, 71 days in country total, went to a total of 23 major cities and addressed hundreds of thousands of people, and have 4 books translated into Mandarin Chinese now, and a full video series with Chinese subtitles that he published. And he stopped promoting those other speakers and put all of his weight behind me. Wow.
Love that. Wow. What an achievement. Now, Jim, I know you shared some story of you and Paula. You went back to a hotel where you guys started dating. Can you tell everyone about that story?
It was a house. Paula and I met. Well, no, Paula and I saw each other and said hello at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock back in 1969. And I thought she was cute and she thought I was acceptable. And we never did take it any further. But a few months later, I was applying for a job at a bank where she worked. And she was the secretary who came out to greet me. And I remember vividly that day. I remember what she was wearing, how she looked, what she said, where I was seated. I thought, if I ask her out, I'm done. So I better avoid this for a while. Well, I put it off for a few weeks, but then one day I did get the job. One day I saw her in the break room and I said, hey, I'm going to go apartment hunting this weekend. You want to go with me? She said, sure. So we drove all over Little Rock looking at apartments. And then I pulled up onto a ridge above the Arkansas River where a new housing development was being created. And there was a rock wall as sort of a gateway to the community. And I popped the trunk of the car and pulled my guitar out. and went over and sat on the rock wall. And she came over and I started singing and she sang with me and she sang better than I did. And I was singing at night in bars and beer joints and clubs. So, I was already making money singing. And it turns out she was an experienced and trained singer. And so that made our first date pretty magical. Well, fast forward to about, I don't know, just a few years ago, I was back in Little Rock and she wasn't. And we live in Austin, Texas now. And I rented a car and drove up to that place on the ridge above the river. And there are a bunch of houses up there now. And I stopped in front of the house that was built where we were sitting. And I popped the trunk and I got a guitar out of the trunk. And I sat there and I played the song that I had sung with her so many years before and took a photo, a selfie kind of a photo. So I'm schmaltzy as well as being, a speaker. I'm a romantic.
Oh, that's so awesome. Now, Jim, a lot of people are asking, how do you figure out your pricing as a paid speaker? What would advise?
Well, that's determined. Yeah, it's determined by the value that you're offering or delivering in the context in which it's being offered. Like if we all work on Wall Street and we're major investors and we've got serious money, we're dealing in millions every day, and someone asks me to come and speak to that group about investment strategies, that's not $100 speech. That may well be $100,000 speech if I'm giving insider tips that they wouldn't have known otherwise, on how to invest. I don't mean insider trading. Likewise, if I'm speaking to the United Nations, well, it depends. Am I speaking to a forum that is supporting a cause that I believe in? I might do it for free. Am I speaking to a forum that has diplomatic relations reaching worldwide and my words could start or stop a war? I'm probably going to charge a lot. So I don't know. One way to look at it is this way. Go to a Speakers Bureau website, and there are hundreds of them out there. Just type in Speakers Bureau on a search and look at all the Speakers Bureau, and then start clicking through and inquire about various speakers and see what kind of fees they're charging. It typically ranges for a professional speaker between, say, $5,000 and $25,000 or maybe $30,000 for the better known ones. And the things that tend to separate people are depth of experience, public visibility, like if they've got a huge internet following, then they're probably worth more. If it's, somebody like Simon Sinek that's got a big TED following, then he's going to charge more. Brene Brown certainly made her bones that way. She had a good message, but when she started, her TED Talk wasn't there. And now then she's a major TED personality. She's able to charge enough to buy a house for a single speech. And my own personal fees are $15,000 for a keynote and $25,000 for a full day program and expenses. But I've got all these published books. I've got a top 1% TED Talk. I've got, all these other assets going for me. So figure out what it is for your market. And I know some people that never charge a speaking fee because they're selling a service or a product that generates enough profit that it wouldn't matter if they got a speaking fee. In fact, I know some people that actually pay to be the speaker at the next conference, as long as that's the right conference for their buyers. Mm-hmm. But you've got to be really clear if you're going to do that kind of risk, that the people in that audience are people that are likely to buy what you have to offer and that you get your opportunity to offer it. I've had people say to me, hey, would you do your speech for less if I allowed you to have your books and your training materials available for sale at the conference? And I used to say yes to that all the time. And so I would take a discount and then try to sell my products. Well, I found that what happened a lot of times is they would set up my display table in an area where there was no traffic. So the people had to intentionally go there to buy. So no one was going to see my materials unless I personally invited them to follow me and let's go over there. And then I learned to do what Brian Tracy called it back in the day, be a rock in the river. Figure out where the flow of people is going to be leaving that room and set up right there, right in the middle of it. So they have to walk by your table if they're going to get out of the room, go to the restroom or wherever they're going. And that way, at least you get their attention. And if you have something they want, they'll stop and look at it and possibly buy it. So there are lots of ways to think about your fee. And you can also, you'll discount your fee. A lot of people will. If someone says, we want you for 4 different engagements, how much would it be for 4? You say, well, I'll give you a discount, but it only applies on the 4th one. Because they could do the first one at the discount and then cancel the other 3, and they would have taken advantage of it. So if you're going to give a discount, give it on the last one of the series. And also I've had occasions where, like Sony, the technology people, they said, hey, Jim, we want you to give a speech at our conference. And we also want to get your books for everybody and your recorded materials. But we don't have a budget for that. I said, oh, but you've got toys. And they said, what? I said, you have toys. They said, what do you mean toys? I said, like a home theater system for me. And they said, oh yeah, we could do that. I said, and a this and a that and a that. And they said, yeah, we could do that too. So I ended up with a house full of technology installed by a professional. And I did it in exchange, in a barter trade, basically, for my training materials. Not too shabby. And I did the same thing with Kaman, Kaman Music Company years ago for 3 guitars, a music stand, 3 microphones, microphone stands, an amplifier, and a stool. So, I got like $15,000-$20,000 worth of musical equipment from a top provider, and did all that in exchange for some of the services that I was offering. So there's a lot of ways to get paid.
Wow. Jim, last question before we're going to do the Q&A.
Okay.
How do you figure out your message if you're doing so many things? How did you figure out you tend to hone for leadership? What advice would you give?
Well, 2 ways to look at it. And one is to look at it through their eyes. What are they looking for? And the other is to look at it through your heart. What do I have to say? When I went to China, I was another white guy in a suit. I was there delivering a talk on leadership, a talk on sales, a talk on communication strategies, which included public speaking. But I realized after the first few speeches, that although those were, with the slides and sounds and video and all that stuff, fully mediated, well put together programs that were basically my books delivered live, I realized that what the people were most resonating with was the message of how to live a meaningful and satisfying life. Because no one ever talked to them about that. No one. And I'll tell you a quick story in a minute related to that. So I started building up that portion of my presentations to the point that the final year, that was the only thing I talked about. How do you live a more meaningful and rewarding life and be a good leader, a good speaker, a good salesperson, a good whatever? So I was in Kunming, which is in the southern central part of China, and I was speaking to about 1,000 people. And during the day, I was speaking through an interpreter. So I would speak a paragraph, Kitty would speak a paragraph, I would speak another, she'd speak another all day long. And then Kitty was always at my elbow, and she's a great friend. And we went up to my suite for lunch, and we're sitting up there with our little group, and I've got a security detail around me like Daniel said, I have to be protected over there because everybody over there wants selfies or something. They want to be seen with the teacher, the master, and so they treat you like a rock star, literally, screaming and cheering and everything. And so the security detail, rigid looking people in uniforms, and they join hands and they keep the people away from me. And they do that all the way to the stage and all the way off the stage to the elevator and up to my room. So I'm sitting there eating lunch, and Kitty says to me, "Jim, see that guy over by the door?" I said, "The Rock." And this is guy like this, you couldn't move him with a bulldozer. He was just solid rock. And she laughed and said, "Yeah, The Rock." She said, "He was talking with me on the elevator on the way up." I said, "Yeah, I noticed that." She said, "Well, since you don't speak Mandarin, I'll tell you what he said." He said he's never in his entire life heard ideas like this. And what you said moved him very deeply. And I thought, wow, it never would have occurred to me I was getting through to him because you couldn't see it. So I waited until no one was looking. And I went over to him and I stood about arm's length in front of him. And I did this, that fist inside the flat hand, the salute where you slightly bow. And then I did this, both hands on my chest, moved them outward toward him in a thank you gesture. And I said, "Thank you." And that's all I did. Okay. He was looking me in the eye and he started crying. And I looked around, nobody was watching. So I pulled him in and held him. And he started sobbing. And I held him until he stopped sobbing. And then I pushed him back to arm's length. And I did that little salute again. And he did the same. And then I went back and sat down with Kitty. Now, nobody saw what went on. So this was our little private moment. Well, later that day, after the program was over, we're at dinner. And Kitty said to me, "What did you do to The Rock?" I said, "I didn't break him. I promise. I didn't." She said, "No, seriously. What did you do?" And I told her about that little thing. She said, "Jim, he would die for you. Right here today, he would die for you." I said, "Oh my God, what a responsibility." Now, some people would say, "What an honor." No, 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 no. I mean, yes, it's an honor, but think of the implications. What if I wasn't taking my message as seriously as he was? What if I was just flippantly throwing out some ideas? I didn't know for sure whether they were solid ideas. Or what if I was encouraging an attitude that was going to get these people in trouble later on? So what a responsibility. When you're in a position of that much influence, you darn well better be a good person, because if you don't, it's coming back, and probably coming back to you ultimately. And so I would have lost a lot of sleep if I didn't feel like I was given my honest, honorable best at that time. Whew. Goosebumps.
Thank you for sharing that, Jim. Dan, do you want to do a reset?
Yes, Jim, incredible. I think this shows of how of a kind and good-hearted person you are. And I'll never forget that when you said, how to be a good speaker, be kind. So we are going to go to Q&A right now. Before we do that, just real quick, how much more time do you have, Jim?
I'm showing 7:17 Central Time, and I was planning to go up to the hour. So I'm good for another 40 minutes.
Okay, we got a lot of questions here, so we'll get through those. Before we do, we're going to end the live in a second. So I just want to make sure that people know where they can find you again. It's Going Pro, the experience, Going Pro experience. It's really an incredible experience. I know you just did one in Nashville, Tennessee. We can't wait that hopefully we can attend in 2022. This will be incredible. Going Pro experience. If you want to know more, reach out to Jim on LinkedIn, or you can search his name. There's 300,000 websites, but if you go to his main website, Jim Cathcart, and you can message him there. You can even message him. We have messaging on here, but LinkedIn, though, is the best way. But if you want to learn more about the Going Pro experience, or maybe you want to go to Machu Picchu in 2022, message Jim.
That one's coming up. And my website's only my last name, Cathcart. Jim Cathcart will get you there. but it's Cathcart.com.
Oh, okay, Cathcart.com. So it's even better. Go to Cathcart.com. Go to Jim Cathcart on LinkedIn. If you're already friends with him on Facebook, you can send him a message. If you're not friends, though, no worries. There's always LinkedIn. You can send him here, Cathcart.com, Going Pro Experience.